Okie doke. So for those guys who have entered, and I'm sure there'll be people kind of like streaming in, but hello and welcome. I am Chris, and then you see Sarah and Michael. So we are the three dietitians at the Endurance Edge, and we are so excited to not only be together virtually as staff members, but also to have you guys here during this very interesting and wild and weird time. So welcome to How Not to Stress Eat. We kind of all have like a little piece of this puzzle, so, and we'd like to keep you guys involved too, so throw out questions into the chat box at any time. So let's roll. Sarah, you want to start?
Yeah, so like Chris said, we each kind of took one piece of the puzzle. My piece was the macronutrients and how they can contribute to or prevent stress eating. So I'm not sure who all's in here, but just kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. When we're talking about the macronutrients, we're talking about carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And more specifically, why we're concerned with those three is because we can eat in a way where it either is going to make us crave things more, or we can eat in a way where it's going to help us stay full and satisfied. And so that's why we want to pay attention to those three, specifically protein and fat. So those are the two fulfilling macronutrients. They're the only ones that provide satiety, and that's because they stay in the stomach a little bit longer. Versus carbohydrates, their main purpose is to give you energy, right? I'm sure a lot of athletes know this. They give us quick, immediate energy, but they're not going to fill us up. And sometimes, depending on the carbohydrate, depending on what else you've had that day, they may actually make you crave things more. So bottom line with the macronutrients is, with this new lifestyle that we're all living, staying at home, you still want to stick to your normal eating pattern, which means having, your normal eating schedule with meals as much as you can. So if you were somebody who got up at 8 a.m., had your breakfast at 8:30, had lunch at 12:30, and dinner at 6, try and stick to that to the best of your abilities. I know there was like a couple weeks period where we're all trying to figure out what this new life looks like. And I'll admit, there was days where I didn't have lunch until 2 o'clock because I was sitting in my kitchen working. But you really want to try and stick to that schedule the best that you can. With your meals, you want to make sure that your meal composition is, you have carbs, protein, and fat. So we have a fueling edge system that we talk about that prioritizes protein. You want to focus on choosing color fuel is what we call them. So when you think of fuel, right, carbohydrates, when we say the word color, what comes to mind? It should be all of those fruits and vegetables, right? Versus if you're thinking of like traditional carbohydrates, the starches and whatnot, they're all kind of like tan and white. So in our fueling edge system, the first thing that we focus on is protein. Second thing's going to be that color fuel. Next, you want to add in some healthy fats. That's just going to kind of help keep you full. And then lastly, we're going to add in all of those traditional starchy carbohydrates, which we call extra fuel. So I know I kind of ran through that pretty quickly. I'm a visual person, so let's kind of talk about it in terms of food, because everybody can visualize food. So let's say you're building a salad for lunch, right? So first you want to pick your protein. Personally, I want to pick salmon for my salad. So I got my protein, salmon. Then we're going to choose our color fuel. So I think in my fridge I have romaine lettuce, carrots, and some pickled onions. So those are going to be my colors in my salad. Next, I'm going to talk about healthy fats. Yes, there's some healthy fat in my salmon, and most proteins are going to have some fat in them, but I'm feeling a little extra hungry today, so I'm going to add a little avocado in just to kind of give it a little bit more bulk and to kind of help fill me up. You could also do, your fat could be your dressing, like an olive oil dressing. And then we're going to talk about extra fuel. So today I worked out this morning and went for a walk because it's so nice outside. So I moved a little bit more than I have been maybe the past couple of days. So I could have a little extra fuel if I wanted to. So like I could throw some quinoa on top of my salad. Basically this whole system is meant to build a fulfilling meal that's nutrient dense. When you do that and stick to your normal eating pattern, you're going to help prevent a lot of those cravings because I love to use this analogy or example. Think about right after Thanksgiving, okay? Right after Thanksgiving dinner, they bring out the pumpkin pie. Do you want that pumpkin pie? You probably want it, but you may not have room. You have to give yourself some time. Versus if you haven't eaten all day and somebody brings out a pumpkin pie, you're probably going to eat the whole pie. So the whole point with cravings and stress eating is to fill up on nutrient-dense foods so that you're a little less likely to kind of give into those cravings, if you will. You're just laying the groundwork. There's a lot more to stress eating, which Chris and Michael will get into, more of like the nitty-gritty details. But if you start with a good base of nutrient-dense foods, making sure you're filling up, making sure you're sticking to your schedule, and staying hydrated, you're already starting off on the right foot. That was a lot, but I want to make sure you guys have time to go into your piece of the puzzle.
Digest.
Yes.
Food puns. We love food puns. So I think a good kind of tie-in to that is, because I've been guilty of like eating lunch at 2 or 3 o'clock. I mean, the more our motivation wanes throughout the day, and I think Michael's going to kind of get into this in terms of like an environment and that kind of thing, but the longer you go without food, the more motivated you are to eat. And generally speaking, you're going to go for those things that are going to give you that immediate dopamine kind of rush, if you will, which is that neurotransmitter that is generally satisfied very well by junk food. So by integrating that strategy of eating regularly throughout the day, and keep in mind that something it takes about 4-ish hours to empty, which is why Sarah was saying it's so important to make sure you have protein and fat. Even if you're just like, I'm just going to have an apple. Well, you're going to be hungry easily in another hour. So, and I think you're going to talk about snacks too, right, Sarah?
Yeah. So, a lot of people, if you were like I said, sticking to your normal schedule, if you were somebody who always had an afternoon snack or always had a morning snack, snacks are not necessarily the enemy right now. With anything, you just have to be mindful of what you're snacking on and how much you're snacking. So we want to choose smart snacks. We should be having a blog post come out about some good options for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Like Chris said, when it comes to snacks, we want to make sure that we are pairing an apple or something with protein and fat. So in meals, we want to make sure we have all 3 of the macronutrients. With snacks, you want to make sure you at least have 2, especially if you're doing like a carbohydrate heavy snack, like an apple, for example. Now, if you just wanted to sit down and have a hard-boiled egg or, a piece of cheese or some nuts, you can do that because they're going to fill you up. Now, if you are just looking for something salty to munch on, maybe you just want to have a little popcorn. It's a low-calorie snack. It might fill that craving. But if you are really hungry and it's in between meals, a little bit of popcorn isn't necessarily going to get you to the next meal. It might get you to the next 30 minutes, and then you might be having another snack. So just use smart snacks.
Smart snacks. I dig. Michael, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you guys have touched on a couple of my things already, so making it easier for me to segue.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So one of the big things is like thinking about your environment and setting yourself up for success. One of the ways that like I equate it is it's the same way that if you get a puppy, you like kind of puppy proof your house, or if you have a kid, you like baby proof your house, so that they don't stick their fingers in like electrical sockets, and like dogs don't chew up your shoes and stuff. So you want to do the same thing with yourself, set yourself up for success. Like if you know that if there's a bag of M&Ms in your house, you're going to eat all of them, don't keep a bag of M&Ms in the house. So it's just kind of being mindful of like what you tend to turn to when you stress eat. And not everybody is a stress eater. I think like largely a lot of people are emotional eaters. But there are people out there that when they get stressed, like hunger just disappears. So if that's you, that's a very different a route of solutions. But for most people that are stress eaters, it's going to be kind of figuring out like being mindful about the whole situation. So thinking about what things, like knowing what things really trigger your stress eating. So if it's like work stress is the worst for triggering stress eating, kind of knowing that. And if you have a really stressful day at work, like making sure that you have that plan in place, like Sarah talked about, to make sure that you've got well-balanced meals and snacks to set yourself up for success from that perspective. And then the other thing is like if you know that you have like a stressful work week coming up, you can also kind of make sure that you stock up on that stuff in advance. And then, so when it comes to the environment, like I said, keeping all those good things around, trying to limit some of the bad stuff we keep around. But the other piece of that is that we can't avoid like the treats forever, you know, like that's not realistic to think that we're never going to eat another M&M or never have a piece of cake ever again. So some of it's also about finding balance, and it's okay to have like a little bit, but it's about portion control instead.
Well, that's also the psychological, like right now we're all at home.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, oh my gosh, I really want to go and do this. You know, whatever, insert whatever it is that you like to do, but we're much more motivated right now to want to do that because we have been told not to and we cannot.
Yeah.
So it's that psychological trigger that if you tell someone, no, you cannot eat any more M&Ms this week or whatever, then you're just going to want them more.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the forbidden fruit, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But that, I mean, that actually made me think of another thing too, is that, I mean, like you said, a lot of people are home now that aren't typically home. Like if you go to a normal office, like you're only surrounded by but so much food, you know? It's like if you work in an office where they don't put snacks out or whatever, like the only snacks you have available are like the vending machine or what you bring with you. But now everyone's like sitting at home with their pantry. And so anytime we get bored during the day, stressed during the day, like anxious, whatever it is, and we like, if you're an emotional eater, like you just walk over to the pantry and you grab something. And I think that's where a lot of this.
Sarah, didn't you say that you're like working in your kitchen?
Yeah. Yeah. Literally sitting in my kitchen. My kitchen, my office, my kitchen, my workout room.
Yeah.
One-stop shop.
It's multi-purpose. But I think that actually brings up a good point when it comes to the environment too, is even if you have like a small area, you know, if you're like in a 1-bedroom apartment or whatever it is, and you don't have a lot of like differentiation of spaces, we want to create that as much as we can. There's been some research about this, but like we're not super good at differentiating space, like a single space just based on time. So like if we eat all of our meals at the kitchen table, when you're sitting there doing work, your body's like, oh, this is the meal space. So we want to kind of create some different spaces. And this goes into like, this is a bigger thing than just the stress eating. This is kind of like stress management in general. But like if you're now working from home, or if you always work from home, finding like a dedicated space, like having an office space, whether it's like a chair or like a counter somewhere that can kind of be your workspace, and then have somewhere separate that's like your relaxation space. So like if you relax on your couch at night, don't do your work on the couch, because when you get done working, your body's still going to just like subconsciously be like, this is the stress workspace. And the same goes for like our food areas. We want to keep our food areas and try to like differentiate as much as we can. And again, that's like controlling the environment to kind of set up our subconscious for success.
I think you addressed this a couple of months ago in some of our, so we as dietitians, we meet on a regular basis to sort of exchange information and talk about how we can better care for our clients and that kind of thing. I remember you talking about this for sleep, Michael.
Yeah.
Where like not working in your bed and, you know, differentiating that space from other things that it could be used for.
Yeah. So I went to this, actually, there was a really big nutrition conference that I went to, and they had a whole session about sleep because it's super important for appetite, hunger, like all like it's huge in our regulation of how much we eat as well. So I personally don't feel that it's an underestimation to say that getting an adequate amount of sleep is one of the most important strategies we have for improving performance, improving our health, and maintaining weight. And one of the things they talked about there is like, you just want to limit the bed and bedroom to sleep related activities. So a lot of us have a tendency nowadays, especially to like sit on our phones in bed before we go to sleep. And that's bad for a couple of reasons, like with the blue light and the stimulation, but doing work or homework in bed, like any of those things, just again, going back to like our bodies we're so smart in so many ways, but we're also so dumb in some. And like doing that just like confuses your body, and your body's like, I don't know. Is this the sleep space? Is this the stress workspace? I don't know. And we really, to be able to get the most efficient like sleep possible when we get into bed. Like we don't want to be laying awake for 2 hours because that's just wasting 2 hours of our time. We want to get into bed and as soon as our head hits the pillow, fall asleep. And so the way we can do that is by differentiating those spaces.
Nice.
Let's see. Do you want me to keep going or are we bouncing around?
So I think this is a good segue. We just got a question. Sarah mentioned that she would add a starchy carb to a meal on a day that she did more exercise than normal. Would you add that carb to your breakfast or to your lunch when you work out right before, or when you work out right before dinner? Basically, do you add the carb before or after the exercise for that day? Great.
That's a really great question. And with everything, it depends. So that's a hard question to answer. It's almost, I feel like I have two answers for that question. You can add a little bit more carb. If I knew I was going to do an extra workout today, right? Or I knew I was going to do a more intense workout, like athletes who are training for a specific program, you can have more of a higher carbohydrate snack before or add a little bit more to your breakfast so that you can use it during your workout. So that's kind of one strategy. If you're training at a higher intensity, say you're like in season, soccer in season versus soccer out of season. In season, you're just going to have a higher carbohydrate intake overall versus out of season. So it's going to be kind of spread throughout the day. My example was for me as just like an average individual who likes to work out, who's, might have some body composition goals. Some days I'm a lot more mindful about how many carbs I take in because I might have sat on the couch all day because it was a Sunday. Other days I might be, give myself a little bit more just because I moved a little bit more, but you don't necessarily have to put those back in. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but it honestly depends on what your goals are, what your training level is. So it's not, I can't just kind of give a blanket statement. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it too is like individual preference. Like some people would rather just have it all like right after their workout or whatever it is. I'm like one of those people that I'm a carb person. Like I love carbs, which is funny because like if you go to our blog, I did the like high fat diet for a while as an experiment for us. But like I'm a carb person. I think like as an aside, one of the biggest compliments I ever got is someone from Idaho asking me if I was sure I wasn't from Idaho because I love potatoes so much. So personally, I like to spread it out throughout the day with a little bit more emphasis like after the workout to help replenish glycogen and everything. But that's personal preference. I think some of it's finding what works for you. Like some people don't want to eat that much extra carb at one time, whatever it is.
Yeah, some people can't eat it all before they work out just because of how their stomach feels.
Right.
I think
I like that in the situation that you gave, Sarah, I would probably view it more of like a glycogen replacement kind of meal. So I also like that to be my excuse to have like some chocolate afterwards.
It's more of like an excuse to have more afterwards in my view.
Yes. So, and chocolate is rich in magnesium and copper and all of these fabulous things in addition to having some carbohydrates. So it's kind of like my little post-workout treat. And it is serving a purpose and I can so that like psychological thing of I'm not limiting myself, like, yay, this is so fun. And it just generally makes me happy, which is, what carbs generally do. So,
and some of it too, I think like I like the idea of like making it after and having the treat, like treat yourself. But I think, I think for me too, like I look at it, like Sarah, to your point of like training status, like if someone's more highly trained or you're doing like a lot higher volume of training, that might partially be a extra pre-workout snack, like depending on how your meals and everything are spaced. And I think some of it's like situational. It depends on what your day looks like, but that may end up also like the extra carbs may be like a pre-workout, an extra snack before your workout that you might not otherwise have had.
And the other thing to think about, since we do metabolic testing in our office, not currently, but it makes me think of what's called excess post-oxygen consumption, or what's known as EPOC. So when you do a really high intensity workout, And it could be like high intensity strength training or high intensity intervals, like, you know, hill climbing on Zwift, or, you know, wind sprints in your backyard at this time, or what, you know, whatever the case may be. And if it's really taxing, you're going to use a lot of glycogen in that time frame and over the next few hours. So your resting metabolic rate is elevated for a period of usually at least a couple of hours, but oftentimes even up to 48 hours afterwards. So if you've done really hard workouts and then you notice that you're craving a lot of things, that's probably your elevated metabolism. And then people get really stressed out, like, oh my gosh, I'm eating carbs. Like, is that okay? I don't know if that's okay. Like, and then they just end up kind of turning to junk food. So just know that that is not necessarily a bad thing, but are you also getting enough protein? Are you also getting enough fat? And by the way, hopefully you guys can't hear it, but my husband conveniently is like right next to me with the blower. So I am now going to mute myself and you guys are going to have to take over.
So you talked, I just want to interject, but did you talked about the wind sprints in your backyard, but did you see the guy during all of this that ran a marathon in his backyard?
Yes.
He lives in like a townhome or something, has a 20-foot long backyard, and he just ran it over and over and over until he 5 hours later ran a marathon. I was like,
that's dedication. And he did it as a fundraiser.
That's really cool.
Like, I think we need more good news like that these days. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. So Michael, is there anything else you want to mention about like environment?
Yeah. So, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm just going to say, I had a question for you. Like, I know personally a couple of days I've struggled with this, and I'm sure everybody else is struggling with this. Whether it's, you know, eating because you're bored, eating because you have access to your entire kitchen, or stress eating. Are there any things that you can do? I know things that I personally do, but any things that you can do to maybe try and avoid or prevent it?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So the whole point of kind of what I'm talking about is more like mindfulness. So just being like, it's exactly what it sounds like, being mindful, and being aware of yourself and how you're feeling and how that might change your interaction with food and that relationship. So I kind of personally have a checklist in my head that I go through. So so going back to what you said, and you and Chris, sorry. I start to ramble, stutter. So going back to what both of you guys said, we want to eat consistently throughout the day, and we want to make sure that we've had, like, at each meal and snack, we have a balance of macronutrients. So the checklist I go through in my head is, okay, if I'm feeling hungry, how long has it been since my last meal? If it's been an hour, okay, what was in that meal? Did I have like a balanced set of macros? If I did, then what else could be going on? You know, it's like a flow sheet.
I like that. Like, if this, then that. You know, if you've eaten in the past 3 hours, then is it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it like branches down. So like I kind of go through that checklist in my head, but it's like I start with checking in with when the last time I ate was. And if it's been 4 hours, then it's probably about time for me to eat again anyways. Mm-hmm. So then that hunger is probably legit. So all this is going through to see, is it really hunger going on, or is it something else? So then rolling down the list, I check, am I thirsty? Like, have I had enough water today? If I'm like way under on water, then let me start by drinking some water and check in then again and see if I'm still hungry. And then checking in with like your feelings. Like, are you stressed? Is that like why you might be reaching for food? Are you anxious? Like, is it boredom? You know, a lot of people have a tendency to snack when they're bored. And then like, am I tired? Like, if I'm tired and I just ate dinner, why don't I just go to bed instead of eating to try to keep myself awake for another hour? So just kind of going through that checklist, and it's just being aware of yourself and checking in with yourself is really like the best advice I have. And so like, if you can kind of go down that list and like debunk or like say no to all those things, like, no, I'm not stressed. No, I'm not anxious. All of that, then like, it's okay to grab some food, because it sounds like you probably are actually hungry.
Yeah.
And then keeping in mind the balance of macros.
Sometimes too, I think you just have to get out of like the mind space that you're in. You know, if you're like sitting there working away at some emails, if you just like, sometimes I'll just take a minute and like walk outside for a second just to kind of break that concentration. And I realized, oh, I'm not hungry anymore.
Yeah. And I think
You can
that's,
get like mindful and seeing your feelings, and maybe I was writing an angry email to you or something. Who knows?
but I think that's like a good point, is finding like non-food ways to like de-stress or like kind of break that train of thought or that environment or whatever. So it's finding what works for you. I mean, this is like a hugely personal thing. Like everybody has a different way that they like to de-stress. But like finding non-food ways to do that. So instead of turning to food, like going for a little walk, knitting, doing like house chores, like do the dishes real quick and like see if you're still hungry, or like do the laundry or vacuum. I don't know, any of those things. Added bonus.
Cleaning always makes me feel like I'm in control.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And cleaning is like a very active thing usually. Like if you're vacuuming, you're walking all around and like moving. But you can play with pets, you can play with your kids. If it's like stress.
That's a good way to raise dopamine without food. So pets and kids especially.
Yeah. And like getting some, and especially now, like the weather's been so nice. That's like a good way to like, especially if it's like you're working from home and you're in the middle of the day thinking about like, after you just ate lunch, thinking about food, like going outside and getting a little bit of sunlight and walking around for a minute. If you've got pets, take your dog. Some people walk their cats. I mean, you could do that. It wasn't a joke. Some people do.
I know. I'm sorry. It's so interesting. I'm like, oh, look at your baby. Oh, your cat. Okay, cool.
I have a friend who walks their cat like on a leash, like through the neighborhood. But like you could read, I mean, there's adult coloring books, like whatever it is that you need to like kind of just like break where you're at and de-stress a little bit.
Yeah. I just read an interesting article a couple days ago about how people who are in cubicles and don't have access to a window or to the outside tend to have larger cravings for junk food than if you can actually like see the sun or see outside. And I turn my head because I have the window open right next to me, and I could see how that would trigger, you just kind of feel like you don't really know what time of day it is. You sort of lose track of time, and then it's just stressful, and then wanting to reach for the junk foods. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You can position
definitely.
yourself by a window. You're setting yourself up for just those little changes to set yourself up for success.
Yeah. And I think the other thing now is that like a lot of people, because a lot of us are home or, significantly less active, trying to get some activity in throughout the day. Like if you're working from home, taking some breaks to walk around, like do a lap of the house, like go out into your street and go up and down the block, whatever it is, just take a little break, get some movement in. Cause that stuff makes a huge difference. It helps with stress, helps you kind of just like get out of the house so you don't have like such bad like cabin fever or anything.
Yeah.
And just like, getting a little bit more activity, because, if you work in like an office building, like you get a considerable number of steps, like walking from your car into the building, up to your floor, to your office or cubicle, and then back, I mean, that's some steps that if you like just move from your bedroom to your couch, you're not getting.
Not going to help.
Yeah.
Breathing, some like deep breathing also is a good way to manage stress. It lowers your heart rate, decreases cortisol. So even if it's just like 5 deep breaths that you can do, and I know sitting here right now, like my shoulders are kind of collapsed forward, my lungs are collapsed. It's like, okay, whoo, yes, a little cue that. It's like what I tell my kids when they're working on their iPad. I'm like, neck check, and they're like, hovered over their sorry, got a nice shot of gray. Haven't been the hairstylist in a little while. So yeah, some of that deep breathing. And I have found, if you guys, I mean, we're all digitally connected now, but Headspace is one of my favorite apps. It's like a meditation and mindfulness app. And right now they have some additional free resources due to COVID. So like there's one, and it's called Headspace again, and it's, free to download, and they actually have quite a few free resources on there. But as I'm clicking on it, it says Weathering the Storm, and they have a 3 to 10 minute variety of stressed meditations, or these are free, or 1 to 3 minute focused meditation, or a walking at home exercise, mindful meditation, which I think is kind of a cool thing that we probably need to do a whole heck of a lot more of.
Yeah,
outside of food.
There's another app, the one Liz and I use is Insight Timer. And it's like they've got like a ton of guided meditation. They've got a bunch of them for sleep too, which is really good for like people that have a hard time falling asleep, like once you get into bed and stuff. Like, I don't know, like some people aren't super into like meditation and think it's like foo-foo or whatever, but like if you actually do this stuff, a lot of it's just like about like breathing and like relaxing your muscles and stuff. And like, I mean, I already don't have a hard time falling asleep, but I'll fall asleep in like 30 seconds listening to one of those things.
You just offended everyone. No, just kidding.
Yeah. See, like Liz, I'm glad Liz chimed in. I didn't want to throw her under the bus or anything, but she has such a hard time falling asleep. Like it'll take her like, if we don't do a meditation, it'll take her like an hour or something to fall asleep. And I'm going to sleep in like 3 minutes on a bad day. And like,
by the way, for those of you guys listening, Liz is Michael's wife, and she is also a dietitian. So yeah, they have the nerd household here.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I don't know, like I've gotten kind of like turned on to all this stuff because it like, I thought it was all like foo-foo, and I was kind of like, oh, this is ridiculous mindfulness. Like I just eat when I eat, and like, I don't need to listen to something to help me fall asleep, but like, I don't know, all these things help. I mean, just being more aware.
It's a new habit.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're having problems with sleeping or like, you know, any of these things, why not give it a try, you know?
Well, just like you mentioned about how the hormonal responses of like appetite regulators, if we can lower that stress response, we're going to have less need to have these cravings. But I want to make sure I get to some of these questions. So this says, Tammy says, I only get hungry about once a day, but try to hit my macros during the day. Is it okay to wait until your tummy is grumbling to eat, or to have emptied your bowels before eating another meal? I work out 6 days a week, but only get hungry once or twice a day. Who wants to take that? I feel like that's a Sarah question.
You got voluntold.
Yeah, there you go. You're welcome.
Getting hungry, there's a fine line in getting hungry. Like if I like to think of the hunger scale, so from 1 to 10, and I always mess these numbers up because I'm a visual person. I should have it written down in front of me. But think of 1 being, let me see how I put this. 1 being extremely stuffed, like after Thanksgiving, right? And 10 being extremely hungry. I haven't eaten for days. You want to try and find like a range of 3 numbers where you're starting to get a little bit hungry, and you want to eat before you get too hungry, because as Chris mentioned, when you're a little bit too hungry, you kind of go, your inhibition's down and you'll go for anything that's going to create that like quick dopamine response. Typically it's carbs or junk food. So you want to kind of stick to your schedule. If you found a schedule that works for you and you only get hungry once a day, I'd say it's working for you. But at the same time, you have to kind of adjust. And if it's your typical mealtime and you're not necessarily hungry or you're still full, you don't necessarily need to eat right then, just because it's time. So I was talking to a guy the other day, and there's fluidity with nutrition. You're not going to do the same thing every day. He wanted a plan that he could follow every day for the rest of his life, which I get, like, that'd be awesome. But you have to kind of, there's some ebb and flow day to day. If you do a morning workout one day, that's going to be different than if you don't work out or do an afternoon workout. So I think, to answer your question in a very long-winded answer, your plan seems to be working for you. I would say it's okay to eat when you start to get a little bit hungry. You don't need to be famished, but you also don't need to eat if you're not hungry just because it's time. You guys agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think some of it too is like everybody kind of responds differently. Like people feel hunger in different ways. I might be weird in this respect, but like my stomach does not growl until I'm like starving. Like I usually like before that will start to get like the shakes and stuff. But like I can tell my blood sugar's down and everything before my stomach starts grumbling. So some of it's just like knowing how you respond. And then like when you get those early signs, go ahead and having like a meal or snacks that you don't get like ravenous. So again, that's like setting yourself up for success. Like having something when you start to feel hungry instead of after it's way too late and you're going to eat the entire vending machine or whatever it is.
So I think on that note, good segue. If you guys want some additional resources, I think so much of nutrition is behavioral based. There's 2 good resources, and we will email these to you guys. So don't stress about like writing anything down right now. But one of my favorites, and it's on the shelf at the office, it's called Mindless Eating by Brian Wansink. So he's a food psychologist, and he does his research up at Cornell. And it's just so fascinating how mindlessly we eat and how our environment can either poorly set us up or set us up for success, just like Michael's been talking about. And we're not making this stuff up. Like, there's good research-based evidence on setting yourself up for success. Everything from like putting fruit and easily accessible. I had another client who says that every weekend she like makes herself a veggie tray and she sets it out for everybody to eat on a Saturday. So when you walk by, you're like, oh, you have to make that decision. Do I have a carrot or do I not have a carrot? Versus if you're walking by the M&M jar, then you have to subconsciously make the decision.
And there's no decision. You're obviously going to have M&Ms.
Right, exactly.
It's like the opposite of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and the fruit bowl, if that's out, we tend to eat those things more. If things are in clear containers, we're going to eat it more. If things are in the front of the cabinet, when you open the cabinet, that's the first thing you see. You're going to be like, oh, look, potato chips. Like, yes. Versus if you can move the healthier stuff to the front. So there's a lot of different strategies specifically that both myself and Michael and Sarah can help you guys with. Which leads me, and I'm going to get into micronutrients here in a second. So thank you guys first for attending, but we've got a little special, a discount on a virtual initial consult meeting with Michael and Sarah specifically, because I love keeping these guys on payroll because these people are amazingly smart and sharp and do a fantastic job. So I'm going to send that to you guys also in an email and give you also a free month for our maintenance plan, which is basically checking in with these guys with your select dietitian on a monthly basis. And it's really rather affordable. Our maintenance program is $69 a month, and we do accept health savings account cards. Similarly, and then I'll turn off my sales pitch. We have a segment of the business. It's called the Fueling Edge, which we help you. It's a meal service. So we also have a discount code for that. So again, check your email. Okay, anything else you guys want to finish off with in terms of, and then I'm going to get into micronutrients.
Yeah, I just have my last.
And environment.
Yeah, I just have one last thing, and you brought it up, which is like the mindless eating and distracted eating. So there's been like a lot of research about that. There's like obviously an entire book about it. But research suggests that we tend to overeat when we're being distracted by other things. So like if you're eating your meal in front of the TV, if you're on your phone while you're eating, like we have a tendency to overeat. And so one of the big things we can do is like put away devices, turn off TVs, all that kind of stuff while we're eating. Like it's super tempting to eat in front of the TV. You don't want to miss your stories or whatever it is. But go ahead and shut that off and like focus on your meal. And then this goes for meals and snacks, all of like anytime we eat, like really be mindful about the food, like smell the smells. How does the food smell? How does it taste? What does it look like? How like textures, like appreciating all the aspects of your food, makes you enjoy it more, but it also like will kind of keep us from just mindlessly eating.
So inhaling your food is unacceptable?
I mean, I would just say it's not encouraged.
All right, so we talked about setting yourself up for success in terms of environment while you're at home to avoid stress eating, as well as spreading out your macronutrients throughout the day so that you're managing that hunger. So another thing that I want to make sure that we go over is micronutrients. So is there a magic pill that can like cure stress or help us eat less? And that is not necessarily the case, but I will say there are certain nutrients that can get more depleted as you're stressed, and there are certain things that we can do, at least from a supplemental perspective or from a food perspective. So one of them, which is a pretty easy fix and probably seems like it's perhaps more in the limelight right now, but vitamin C. Sarah, since you're unmuted, any ideas as to what has vitamin C in it from a real food perspective, and you guys feel free to raise your hands.
Well, most people are going to think citrus fruits, but bell peppers actually have a good amount of vitamin C.
Yeah, they do. It's not quite strawberry season here, but it's probably going to get close. So strawberries, another good source. Limes, lemons, any of your citrus types of foods. So just trying to incorporate those into your regular dietary patterns are super helpful. And what we've seen from a stress perspective is even up to, doesn't really have to be a lot. In the literature, as I was going back through it, it's only about 200 milligrams a day. In terms of supplemental, this particular research study was supplementing healthy medical students. Here comes my blower husband. Hey!
I thought somebody was bumping music.
Get his attention. Hopefully you guys can hear okay. But let's see, supplementation of healthy medical students with 200 milligrams a day of vitamin C enhance their tolerance to cold exposure. So keep in mind that stress is not just like mental stress. It can also be heat exposure, cold exposure. It could be physical stress. It could be an injury. So those types of
It'd
things.
be like high volume training.
Oh, for sure. And that's one of those things, I would rather people get it from food if they can, because 200 milligrams is not a particularly large amount. When we start getting into 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams or more, what is that stuff that you get off the shelf?
Which is in like that airborne stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. That's, and I just want to be clear, because I think there has been some misinformation floating around on the old interwebs. You cannot cure COVID-19 with vitamin C. I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. There are no supplements that can cure this. It's just a matter of keeping yourself healthy and reducing your stress as best as you can through nutritional strategies. Anyway, so like, I know people are like buying the emergency off the shelf, and it's like, it's not gonna cure you. Wash your hands, people. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. So vitamin C is an easy one. Another one is magnesium. So I can't. Michael, did you do that magnesium handout way back in the day for me?
I might have.
Anyway.
That was a very long time ago, so don't ask me what was on it.
These guys have been with me for like forever. What the beauty of magnesium and the types of foods that you can get it from are like dark leafy green vegetables, and certain nuts and seeds, but it is something that's lost in our sweat too. But it helps, it does 300 different things in the body, but one of the things is to help with muscle relaxation. So oftentimes I will have people take a magnesium supplement about 30 minutes before going to bed, and that helps with kind of getting everything to relax. Depending on how it's chelated, so what type of magnesium, is it a magnesium glycinate, is it a citrate, is it a malate, is it an aspartate? There's lots of different types of magnesium. So if you guys need help with that kind of stuff, that's where we can step in and help you choose the appropriate supplement. Because please, for the love of all things holy, don't buy your supplements on Amazon. You don't know how they've been stored. Oftentimes people can slap what seems like a legitimate label on something that's not actually what it is. So buy your supplements from a reputable source. We use an online dispensary, and it helps us keep our doors open and lights on by making those very specific recommendations to you. What else am I missing? DHA is a cool one. So Sarah and Michael, where does DHA come from in food?
Sarah, you're the meal person.
I know, right?
Answered all the questions.
You're doing so good.
What? So like,
it's a fatty acid, right?
It's a fatty acid. Yep. So
like our omega-3 rich foods.
Yes. Yeah. So salmon. Do we have salmon on the menu this week? I can't remember. Oh no, I think it's cod.
It's cod.
Yeah. We had salmon last week.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But wild Alaskan salmon is a great source of DHA, but it's also easy. If you're somebody who's not going to eat a good quality oily fish, like anchovies, that's another one. I bet everybody just left because I just said anchovies, but that's another good source of omega-3s. And there are some good supplements. So having that extra level of DHA in the system is good for helping our stress response. And then one more I wanted to mention, which was tyrosine, which I saw some interesting research as it relates to like military, taken before, let's see if I can, because it's a precursor to norepinephrine, which helps us in stressful situations. So, and it's not really a whole lot, 100 to 150 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Prevented declines in cognitive function and performance measures in volunteers subjected to various types of acute stress, like loud noises, cold temperatures, and sleep deprivation. So that's an easy one to, and you don't necessarily have to take any of these chronically. Sometimes it's just for short periods of time when you know it's going to be stressful, when you know you're going to be sitting at home, or when you know you're going to be traveling a lot, or someday when we travel again. So yeah. Someday.
So Chris, if somebody was prioritizing budget, which one of those would you recommend for them to take for stress?
I would say of any of those, the one that has the most research behind it, not just for stress, but for other health applications, would be DHA. So your omega-3s, because we generally are pretty terrible at getting those in our diet. Keep in mind that if you guys are going to buy stuff, we have a whole webinar or a whole YouTube video on omega-3s. So I'll link to that in the email that I sent to you guys. Make sure that you're buying the triglyceride form, and that it's in a dark bottle. So it's not a clear container. So don't buy it off the shelf at like your big box store that's in a clear container, because you can actually have the opposite effect. So make sure you keep it in the fridge. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a big honking fish oil pill, DHA. Like I give my kids a little one, and it's like little tiny, and they actually chew it, believe it or not. And it makes my husband want to vomit every time they do it, but they do it, and they don't mind it. So, but I would say of those that I mentioned, the most versatile is DHA. And I do also love magnesium. I think magnesium is pretty cheap and can go a long way for stress, for cramping, for athletes. Yeah, good questions. All right, so let's make sure we got all of the chat stuff. Yay, strawberries. Oh, broccoli. Yeah, Vicky mentioned broccoli for vitamin C. It's also high in calcium. Okay, cool. All right, do you guys want to add anything? If anybody else has any other questions? Or you guys want to add anything? Sarah or Michael?
I don't really have anything. Just maybe can we summarize? So Chris, from a micronutrient perspective, what are your big takeaways? Like 1 to 2 big takeaways.
I would say eat whole foods as much as you can, and a varied diet as much as you can. And if you can eat salmon on a regular basis, like 3 times a week, you are benefiting your stress response through food. Consider eating some oranges and maybe a little bit of magnesium at night.
Okay. Sarah, what are your big, like, just a few takeaways?
Yeah, before I do that, Beth Simmons asked to repeat the 4th micronutrient that you discussed. It was tyrosine.
Tyrosine, yes. Tyrosine, tyrosine.
So yeah, my big takeaways are to stick to your old normal eating pattern to the best of your abilities, and then to really focus on nutrient dense meals that include all 3 of the macronutrients.
I like that. And I like the routine piece too. I think that's good from like my perspective of the mindfulness too, but that's like one of the big things you hear as like a recommendation for like people being home so much too. Is just like, yeah, you have the ability to just like if you're like out of work, or if your work from home schedule is very flexible, you have the ability to sleep until noon. But like, if that's not your normal routine, like don't do it. Like try and replicate your normal routine as much as possible. Like get up, like have your morning coffee when you normally would, like try and like kind of like maybe change out of your PJs into something else, even if it's still like comfortable, like lounging clothes, like maybe just like try to replicate a normal day as much as possible. So I like that.
I blew dry my hair for y'all today.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I always wondered what the past tense of that was. Is it blow dried? Blue dried? See, I just don't know.
My degree's in nutrition, bro.
So my few takeaways are still like really reinforcing sleep, aiming for that 7 to 9 hours, just getting good quality sleep. That's like a whole webinar in and of itself about like blue light and time and circadian rhythms and everything. But like for now, just aiming for that 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Minimize distracted eating. So kind of turn off devices, put away devices while you're eating. And then just being mindful around how you feel around meals. And then like during the meal, checking in with yourself and the food and everything, and just being more aware.
Awesome. Michael, you want to give everybody like a little tidbit as to what might be coming up?
Yeah. So here in sometime in the next few weeks, hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to be launching our podcast, which will be the Find Your Edge podcast. So I'm kind of leading that up as the host of that. The whole idea is I'll be talking to athletes, experts. I'll be talking to these two fine folks. I'll be talking to, our network of PTs that we're partners with, like anyone and everyone I can find that is an expert on anything to talk about that thing that they're an expert on. But essentially the takeaways are going to be like key actionable steps and things that you can do to actually improve your health and performance. Because we get that so much. It's like we talk about these things, but it's like, okay, what should I actually do with this information? And so that's the whole point of the podcast, is talking to all these experts and boiling down their wealth of information into a few actionable things you can do to actually improve your health and performance.
Awesome. All right. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. If you guys, as a small business, we've had the question a lot, like, how can we support you more? So if you guys liked this information, we'll send it all in. We'll send all the summary and all the different links and things that we talked about in an email over the next couple of days. But what really benefits us a lot is to tell your network of friends, write a Google review, like us on Facebook, because or if you have feedback for us that is perhaps constructive, tell me directly, please.
Just perhaps constructive.
Yeah. So we want to do the best possible job that we can to make you guys better performing and healthier and stronger and more awesome. So I think I just heard a crash, so that might be a good segue to go. But high five, Sarah and Michael. Yay! And thank you guys for those of you guys who stuck around, and have an awesome day. Stay safe and stay sane. Bye.